Have you been told that your literature review is not critical enough? Has your tutor or supervisor mentioned that your review is too descriptive? Are you struggling to understand how to write a critical literature review? If you've answered yes to any of these questions, then this video is for you. In today's video, I'm going to explain what I call the intellectual ladder, which is an intuitive and effective way of taking your literature review to a higher level. I'll start by explaining each level individually, and I'll apply each level to a case study so that you can learn about how the ladder applies in practice. Hi, I'm Miguel 𝗣𝗧𝗜𝗡𝗦. I am the founder and chief content developer of the Dissertation Academy. And here in the Academy, we are all about bringing you unique tips and tools to help you write a better dissertation. So if you're new here, consider hitting that subscribe button. Writing is best seen as a multi-stage process, whereby you first employ lower-level skills, followed by higher-level skills. And all researchers, no matter the level of experience, have to navigate through the ladder. And the ladder includes 3 steps: description, analysis, and evaluation. And the higher in the ladder you are, the greater the intellectual skills that you are demonstrating. You should see the ladder as a process, or in other words, as a sequence of activities with an order that needs to be followed. In practice, this means that in order to analyze, you have to describe first, and you cannot evaluate without first analyzing. In my experience of supervising and assessing hundreds of dissertations, the biggest challenge for inexperienced researchers like dissertation students is moving from description to analysis. Why is that? Because if you do good analysis, evaluation tends to come almost naturally. And even experienced researchers have to follow the process. However, because they have the skills to climb up the ladder more quickly, they'll do it faster. They don't have to learn how to move from description to analysis to evaluation. They kind of just have to do it. In this tutorial, I'm going to apply the steps in the intellectual ladder to literature reviews. And I'm going to use an example of a literature review for a paper on the attributes of prestigious sports events that I've recently completed. When designing the research, we felt we needed to understand the attributes of sports events researched in previous studies. So we went and looked at the literature with a view to identify what those attributes were. And we did it for 2 reasons. First, because we wanted to understand the attributes and perspectives that had been used before. And this in turn would allow us to assess the extent to which our own perspective, which was from a prestige angle, had been used by other researchers. But we also thought more strategically. We thought that by doing that, it would allow us to discuss the results by comparing the list of existing attributes against the list of the attributes that we generated ourselves. This in turn would allow us to provide evidence of the extent of contribution to knowledge. If we use a different perspective from those employed by previous studies, and in our case that perspective was prestige, could we find some attributes of sports events not identified before? Time to understand what the 3 steps are about. Let's start with description. So what is description about? The purpose of a descriptive review is to identify relevant individual contribution. So descriptive reviews adopt an author-based approach, and they list, often in chronological order, each of the main works individually. As I often describe it, it's about saying that author 1 said this, author 2 said that, author 3 said that, and so on. This is the most basic level, but it's a very important level, and therefore you should spend some time describing. A good literature review starts with a comprehensive description. But bear in mind that description is not the end, but a means to proceed to the next step, analysis. Let's look at our case study on the attributes of prestigious sports events to see how description applies in practice. So the initial task for us was to search for papers who had focused on the attributes of sports events. And for each study, we recorded several elements, including two that I'm going to use in this tutorial. The first one are the attributes themselves. We wanted to understand what attributes those papers had considered. And the second one is the overall perspective that informed the study. And in that sense, we wanted to compare their perspective with our perspective, which is from a prestige point of view. So let's look at the example of 4 of those papers to see how description works. From the most recent to the older paper, we have 𝗥𝗘𝗦𝗧𝗜𝗥 and colleagues from 2018 who looked at attributes from a service-dominant logic and identified 4 attributes. Yoshida and James from 2010 looked at attributes from a service quality perspective and considered 2 types of attributes, service satisfaction and game satisfaction. McCarthy and Osti's 2007 study was carried out from a cultural authenticity point of view and included 4 attributes. Finally, Ferreira and Armstrong from 2004 looked at attributes from a service quality perspective and considered 4 types of attributes. If we were to translate these findings into text, this is what it would look like. For each individual study, we would be describing what was found and the perspective that was employed. And if we bring together the 4 sentences, this is what our paragraph looks like. A sequence of sentences leading to no overall observation. It's a collection of individual facts with no logical conclusion. It's good, but it's not great. So we need to do something with it. We need to do something to make it great. And what can we do to make it great? We need to analyze these studies. An analytical review moves away from an author structure to adopt a themed approach. This means that you start looking at each individual author and focus your efforts on identifying key themes across them. And the best evidence that a literature review is written at an analytical level is seeing statements supported by more than one reference. If a statement is supported by 2 or more references, it means that the researcher is most likely focusing on themes, not individual contributions. One of the most important skills during this step is categorization, which is required to develop themes. And why is that? Well, when you are thinking across individual contributions, you are deploying higher levels of intellectual skills. It's as simple as that. If you look at contributions individually, you are using certain intellectual skills, but when you shift from individual authors to themes, you step up that intellectual level, and therefore you will be demonstrating higher intellectual skills. Time to see how this works in practice by looking at our case study again. Let's go back to the slide where we identify the attributes of sports events considered by 4 studies. You may want to pause this tutorial now and spend a couple of minutes trying to identify common themes across these 4 studies. If we look at the first bullet point of 𝗥𝗘𝗦𝗧𝗜𝗥's paper, we can see that the same type of attributes was also covered by Yoshida and James, and also by Ferreira and Armstrong. Fair enough, the names used in each paper are slightly different, but the essence of the attributes is the same. They all focus on the attributes related to the sporting side of the event. The second bullet point of the first study, off-pitch service quality, is a similar theme to that covered in the same 2 studies, service satisfaction in Yoshida and James' study, and staff attentiveness, pre-game and in-game entertainment and facility in Ferreira and Armstrong study. These attributes focus on the non-game attributes of the service. So if we wanted to start writing the literature at the analytical level, this is what it could look like. For the purposes of our tutorial, only 4 studies are shown, but the vast majority of studies on the topic actually look at the attributes of sports events from a service quality perspective. And therefore, it's appropriate to pick up this theme and mention it with regards to the attributes themselves. You could start by saying that existing studies have considered 2 types of attributes, core and peripheral. These are the 2 themes that we picked up so far. You could then elaborate on each one, providing the necessary evidence to back up your claim. In this instance, you would refer to the various attributes related to on-pitch performance, game attractiveness, and game satisfaction as examples of core service quality, and the attributes related to venue, staff, and additional entertainment as key elements of peripheral quality. We have yet to categorize all the attributes in our initial list, so let's look at the remaining ones. The remaining 2 attributes from 𝗥𝗘𝗦𝗧𝗜𝗢𝗡𝗧 paper focus on the interaction between attendees, and therefore they reflect the experience co-creation perspective adopted in the paper. The 4 attributes from McCarthy and Osti's paper are of a different nature, as they reflect the authenticity approach adopted by the authors. So if we bring everything together into text, this is what it could read like. As you can see, we are identifying key themes and patterns in the literature. We have facts, but we also draw conclusions based on those facts, and that shows higher level intellectual skills. By the way, if you're liking this video, give it a thumbs up, as this will help YouTube to recommend the video to other students. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and also the bell button so that you can be notified every time we release a new video. Developing a literature review at the analytical level already shows tremendous skills, but you can take it further by reaching the highest level possible. So what is evaluation? In simple terms, evaluation focuses on drawing conclusions about the merits and limitations of what we are analyzing. The purpose of evaluation is to identify gaps, strengths, limitations, or biases in the themes that you identified during the previous stage, the analysis stage. The particular argument sought in our case is to assess what areas have been covered by existing research on sports events attributes. And we did so with a view to establish that our perspective has not been adopted in previous studies. Therefore, the focus is on persuading the reader that our study, which uses a prestige angle in the study of sports events attributes, has not been done before, and therefore we are covering a gap in the literature. This is how writing the evaluative text could look like. By starting with description, moving forward to analysis, and ending with evaluation, we were able to make bold claims about the state of the literature, and at the same time argue that our paper adopts a new perspective on the topic as seen in this part of the abstract of the paper. I would love to hear about your experience of applying the ladder to your literature review. So let me know in the comments what your analytical or evaluative paragraph is, and explain how you arrive at it. Did you find the process easy? Did you have any challenges? And if you had them, how did you try to overcome them? And if you have any questions about the ladder, I would love to hear them, and maybe I'll do a video trying to explain it further. More examples of the application of the intellectual ladder are available in the Dissertation Academy's virtual tutor online resource, a video book-based resource which also contains examples of how the ladder applies to presenting and discussing research results. If you want to know more about how to write great dissertations, tap the screen on your right-hand side for more videos, and check the description below for more videos related to the intellectual ladder. That's all for now. See you in the next video.